Hey everybody, welcome to Barter Hordes. My name is Robert. Happy Friday, happy April, slightly belated happy spring if you're in this hemisphere, or fall if you're in the other hemisphere. I didn't get a lot of reading done this week for a couple of reasons. As many of you know, the BookTube Prize, which is my nonprofit side hustle, so to speak, we made the transition from the first round, the octafinals, to the second round, the quarterfinals, this last couple of days. And that always takes me a good 2 or 3 days of work on the computer to get all that done and get the roundup and the video posted on the BookTube Prize channel. This isn't the BookTube Prize channel like it was in the beginning, but it's still my baby, and I still have to talk about it when it's at an important turning point, which it is at the turn of every round. So that took a couple of days of computer work, which messed up my back a little bit. Like an idiot, I sat on the couch and worked for 10 to 12 hours a day on my laptop instead of going downstairs and using my perfectly good desk and office chair. I'll remember that when I have to do that again, because I paid for it for the next couple of days. And also, I've mentioned to a couple of online friends that I have become obsessed with this online soccer manager game. That's the name of it, online soccer manager. It's different from the FIFA video games where you actually play the players and move them around and play the games. The online soccer manager is more like the famous game Football Manager, which I found always a little bit too complicated and baffling. This one's just about right. It's streamlined enough where I can keep up with it. But you become the manager of a club. You get hired by the club. You are given an objective for the year of where your team should finish in your league, and you take over the club. You make the decisions about what players to buy and sell, what strategies and tactics to use, all those things. You don't actually play the games. They're computer generated for you. You just watch the games. And each day, each calendar day is a week or a game week in the actual game. So you can go through a whole season in a month or a month and a half for this game. Because it involves soccer, statistics, and investment to some degree, because you're trying to build the best squad you can with the limited resources you have, all these different things, it's just perfect for me. I've become obsessed a little bit. So I need to find some like-minded OSM players and start a private league somewhere, but I'm enjoying that. But it has taken away from my reading a little bit. The other thing is, as I mentioned, the BookTube Prize has now moved into the quarterfinals. So each of the fields has been cut from 48 to 24 titles. We cut the field in half every round. And last year, if you were with me last year on this channel, I did the BookTube Prize channel, the BookTube Prize challenge, where I challenged myself to read all 96 books in the two divisions by the time we announced the winner in the first weekend in October. And I did it barely, but it started to become a little bit of a chore towards the end rather than a joy. And so this year I decided I wasn't going to force myself to do that again. Kazan from, is it Ever Always Doing or Always Ever Doing or Always Doing Something? She teases me about being a completionist and being on the completion train. And I am guilty of that because I love lists. I'm very drawn to things like that. And so if you give me a list of books that I'm supposed to read, I'm going to try to complete the list. And so I think I'm probably going to try to complete the list of the quarterfinals, the 48 books in the quarterfinals, and not all 96. A lot of the books that got eliminated I may not get into until after the prize is over. But just by chance, a lot of the books from this year's initial field that I've already read got eliminated in round one. So they don't help me towards my quarterfinals challenge. Of the 48 books, I've only read 8 of them, I think. So I still have 40 books to read over the next 6 months. So that's 7 books a month, which is not that bad. I usually read more than that, but that doesn't leave room for a lot of other types of reading. And so I've been trying to read. I have a book club that I'm in every month. I've been trying to read a classic periodically. So I need to get back to a more rigorous disciplined schedule of reading and limit my online soccer manager hours if I'm going to keep up with this challenge. But I have started one of those just yesterday, and so I'm going to try to do the quarterfinals challenge by the end of the year. In terms of what I actually did finish, I finished The Investigation by J.M. Lee, and I'll leave the translator's name in the show notes. This, as I mentioned last time, is a book based on real people. It's based on the real Korean poet, Young Dong-ju, who is widely considered one of Korea's best poets. And he was a young man during World War II. He was studying at a university originally he was in Tokyo, and then I think he went to Kyoto, and was arrested because he dared to write poetry in his native Korean. At the time, as I mentioned last week, Japan had colonized Korea in 1910, and it was so worried about sedition and dissidence that they even suppressed Koreans' names. You had to register it with a Japanese name. And so when these guys were thrown in prison as political prisoners, basically, they were referred to by their prison number or their Japanese names, not their Korean names. They weren't even allowed to speak in Korean. And so he was imprisoned because they saw him as committing a political act when he didn't publish. He wrote some poems in Korean. And so he was thrown into this prison. The story itself is told through the point of view of a very young Japanese prison guard who comes to know the poet. He is asked to investigate a murder of another prison guard who was also close to the poet. And in the process of his investigation, he quickly realizes that no one at the prison wants him to solve anything. They just are pretending to investigate because they don't want any higher ups looking into what's going on at their prison. But it's a pretty grim place for these Korean prisoners. They're not the only ones in this prison, but they have kind of a ward all to themselves, and they're treated horribly. And so it's a story of how art can keep you free somehow. It's a story about how friendships, even among enemies, is possible. It's a story about a mystery, and there's layers and layers and layers of secrets that the narrator gradually has to peel away. It's really touching at times and really heartbreaking at times, and it's really well done. I mentioned last week I don't read Korean, so I have no way of reading this in the original, but I would love to know how the translation feels compared to the tone of the original in Korean. But it was very interesting. I'm really glad I read it. I am back to plugging away at Les Misérables. I have 300 pages left, so I'm hoping that I can knock that out this week. We'll see. I need to get that out of my life. It's become a chore now rather than a joy. At the beginning, it was pure joy, but we haven't even seen or heard of the main character in about 500 pages, and I'm kind of annoyed with that. So that has not lived up to my expectations for it in the second half of the book. And I started Square Haunting by Francesca Wade, which is one of the nonfiction books in the quarterfinals. It's about five women in between the two world wars who lived at various times, not always there together, but they lived in this one square within Bloomsbury, and it's about their remarkable stories tied to this area and their quest to become independent, creative thinkers, writers, teachers, things like that. I've only read about the first maybe 100 pages or so, but it's really good so far. So that's what I've been reading. I'm still cycling. On my Route 66 challenge, I'm almost finished with Oklahoma, almost into Texas now. On my California my coast canyon to the coast challenge, which is from Bryce Canyon, Utah to Laguna Beach, California. I am in California. I just went through the Baker milestone at 366 miles. So I have a little over 200 miles to go, 230 miles to go on that challenge. So I'll finish that up in the month of April, and I'll start another one after that. So still plugging away at those things and enjoying some sunshine in between the wicked thunderstorms that we've been having, which are typical for April. I hope you're well. Hope you're reading something fun, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye, everybody.